like to call to order the California Transportation Commission of June 11th. Can we call the roll, please?
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Present. That's item number one. Item number two is approval of the minutes from May 7th.
Move it.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Tavallone, Commissioner Tavallone, and a second by Commissioner Dunn to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Item number three, Executive Director's Report. Andre?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two items to share with you today. We have a proposed 2014 meeting schedule that I'm bringing for your approval here, with the understanding that there may be some more tweaking to some of the dates as we move forward. We're still working with your staff to make sure that these dates are workable on your calendars. The next year's meeting will be really similar to what we did this year. It's every other month, except this for the 2014, we're asking that you reserve 2 days on your calendars, just in case we have some overspills. Also, this year, we're proposing a change to the calendar for the December 2013 meeting. We're moving the meeting from December 10 to the 11th and the 12th because of available space, as well as I want to bring your attention to a July hearing or workshop that we're having on the STIP guidelines and the fund estimate, and you're more than welcome to attend that one. So that's the first thing I need your approval on, the calendar of 2014 as well as the change for 2013.
Were we going to remove the second retreat in 2014?
Yes, we will take the August retreat off the agenda, off the calendar.
So with those changes, can I have a motion?
Move it.
A motion by Commissioner Tavallone, a second by Commissioner Alvarado. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And this is for both the 2013 change and the 2014 calendar as
And that's subject to amendment with our staff over the next few
yes,
weeks?
as
on
I
2014.
mentioned, yes, the 2014 calendar, there may be some more tweaks that we'll bring probably to the August meeting. I just wanted you to have this on your calendars as soon as possible so we can manage that time. Mr. Chair, one other announcement maybe is this happens to be Ms. Branson's first meeting as the Chief Deputy Director, so I wanted to recognize that and congratulations, Susan.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 4. Any reports from commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Item number 5, commissioners meeting for compensation. You have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dunn, seconded by Commissioner Tavallone. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 6, report by Agency Secretary. Brian.
Sure. Good morning. Brian Annis, Deputy Secretary for Transportation at BTNH. And I just want to cover 3 things briefly in the agency report. One is, I guess really in a sense, a final update, if you will, on the BTNH agency going away. July 1, again, we create the Transportation Agency. And it might bear repeating at this time, we put out in January what we called our project initiation document, really laying out what we think are some of the key areas for the new agency to focus on. And those are, 1, developing and integrating the high-speed rail program into California's existing transportation infrastructure. 2, ensuring that the state's transportation system is capable of achieving the sustainability and air quality objectives outlined in state law. And lastly, developing long-term stable and flexible revenue dedicated to the state's increasingly diverse transportation system. And again, as I mentioned last hearing, come July 1, we're going to be located over in what's called Office Building 1, which is the where the state treasurer is located on Capitol Mall, 915 Capitol Mall. Second issue I wanted to cover was what you've probably heard has been initiated by the agency secretary last week. That's the independent review of Caltrans by the State Smart Transportation Institute, or SSTI. This is an institute out of University of Wisconsin. They've put out recently a very interesting report called The Innovative DOT that had some good examples from California and also across the nation in some innovations in transportation. So we're really looking forward to working with this group. The goal is to build on recent performance improvement efforts by Director Doherty, such as what he set off with the performance review at Caltrans. And the product here is really producing a Caltrans that's more effective and really better able to serve the transportation needs of the people of California. Might mention about the team from SSTI, I think many of whom are known to the California community here in transportation. The SSTI staff is headed by Dr. Joel Rogers, who's at the Wisconsin Institute, and then we have 3 former secretaries of DOTs from other states. From Pennsylvania, Al Beeler, from Massachusetts, Doug Foy, and from North Carolina, Gene Conte, and talked to various people in California that know these individuals well and speak highly of their expertise. The team's going to be looking to do a review and assessment that will include the following: performance measures and reporting outcomes, external and internal communications, management response to superior or inferior performance in the department, also looking at the current status of program documents, manuals, and policy objectives to make sure they are consistent with our current goals. Lastly, they'll be looking at the department's ability to, under current structures, meet the state's mobility, safety, and sustainability objectives. Later this year, the team will produce a report of recommendations on performance and sustainability measures. And let me mention, I did meet with this group, and as former secretaries of DOT, they're not by nature report writers. They're very much interested in implementing reforms and performance improvements to really be a model for the rest of the nation in some of these areas. So they're very excited about the work, and we look forward to having them come out and visit. And many of you may be receiving calls from this group as well as they do some outreach to find out what the current state of California transportation is. And the last part of the update, I just wanted to talk a little bit about high-speed rail because, of course, over the last year, the CTC has been working diligently to allocate projects that are funded with Proposition 1A in the rail connectivity area, and many projects have been allocated and are moving forward in that area. And the backbone for that rail modernization, of course, is the high-speed rail system, the initial segment running from Merced to the San Fernando Valley. And as many of the commissioners know, there were actually 5 teams that were fully qualified to bid on the first construction segment. They met all the technical and fiscal criteria to submit bids. 5 bids were submitted and evaluated. And last week, the High-Speed Rail Board approved authority to the executive director to finalize that first construction package contract. So that concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian? Okay. I'd like to recognize Assembly Member Bonnie Lowenthal, just arrived. Thank you, Bonnie. We'll move on to item number 7, report by Caltrans Director Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, just a couple of things I'd like to offer up. We have a few personnel changes. One of my last remaining deputy positions was the Chief Information Officer. Our IT deputy, and Governor Brown appointed Gigi Smith a little more than a month ago. Gigi has vast experience in state government as a CIO, including with the California Department of Alcohol and Drug Programs and the Department of Rehabilitation. So she brings a wealth of experience to the position, and I look forward to working with her. You may have also heard that I have asked Rick Land to commit 100% of his time to the Bay Bridge project to help us with the completing tasks to deliver that project safely to the motoring public and to assist the existing management team with the heavy lift over the finish line. While Rick is assigned to that project, I've asked Norma Ortega to serve as the acting Chief Deputy Director. And behind Norma Ortega, she has asked Stephen Keck to fill in as the Chief Financial Officer during that period as well. And then behind Stephen Keck, Mr. Ron Shepard will serve as the acting Budget Officer, while Rick is dedicating his time to the Bay Bridge project. I look forward to the conversation on the agenda about Buy America and the utility relocation agreements to move projects forward. We continue to have daily conversations on the subject. We continue to work very closely with the Federal Highway Administration as well as the utility companies, as well as evaluating each individual project to ensure that we don't lose any federal funds and, as quickly as possible, move those projects forward to construction without delay. I would also like to update you on the Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery, the TIGER grants. Last month on April 22nd, a final notice of funding availability was published on the Federal Register to announce the U.S. DOT's $474 million National Infrastructure Investment Program, TIGER 2013. Each agency has the ability to submit up to 3 applications. The deadline for submitting the applications was June 3rd. The department submitted 3 projects. They were the Merced de la Grande Double Track Project in the San Joaquin Valley, State Route 58 Widening Project in the community of Hinckley and San Bernardino County, and the State Route 125 Freeway Connector Project at the border in San Diego County. I also look forward to working with State Smart Transportation Institute initiative. I have worked with these individuals over the last couple of years, and their efforts will complement the program review that we did internally. So I look forward to that external review on bettering Caltrans's performance. And I'd also like to extend my congratulations to Ms. Susan Branson, and I would suggest that this shows the wisdom of your new executive director in selecting Susan for this position. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Malcolm. Any questions of Malcolm? Okay, thank you. Next, item number 8, report from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Vince?
Hello, good morning. Congratulations first for the National Freight Advisory Council or Committee. We've got 5 members from California that are part of that. Kristen Dacus from the Port of Wanimi. I think I got that right. Did I get that right? Wanimi? Yes. That's not bad. I'm pretty good. Genevieve Giuliano from the University of Southern California. Fran Inman, Randy Iwasaki, and Bonnie Lowenthal. So congratulations. I think that's a great influence, a great opportunity, I think, that to make sure that California influences how the nation works in its freight. So we appreciate your volunteering to be a part of that for those. And there were others I know that volunteered also. So thank you for that. Malcolm already talked about Tiger, so that's closed up. That ended up, we should be hearing something. It'd probably be a few months before we get any answers on where those dollars are going to go. MAP 21, we've got a lot of stuff that's going on with MAP 21, a lot of the new measures, performance measures. Keep looking at our website, the MAP 21 website, about where the performance measures are going. I think it's going to be important for you to influence that, and I'm looking at here, and I'm also looking here when I say you to influence that. So take those opportunities, I've said that before, to influence how that looks, what the performance measures look like, comment on them, we listen to them. We actually have the guidance out for the Transportation Alternatives Program, that's the TAP program. There's been some new interim guidance for the CMAQ operating assistance, and I think the big thing on that is it's gone from 3 to 5 years in operating assistance. The direction I got from my director was say that and tell everybody to look it up. instead of elaborate on it. So 3 to 5 years, operating assistance, take a look at our website, and that'll give you some more information on that. Mike Duman, my chief operating officer, has been asked to come up to D.C. for a rotational assignment for a few months, which is great for us here because he's going to be working in that area called Buy Something. It's something buying something. Buy America, that's the one. So that he's actually our deputy here, but he's going up there and he's going to be one of the leads for Federal Highway in that area. So I think it's going to help us kind of get a lot more information on that. Anthony Fox, mayor of Charlotte, has passed a big hurdle we talked about earlier. He's gotten through the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, so now he's waiting for a full Senate vote. And that could happen, I think we talked about it, Yvonne, it could be in days or weeks or, so no real handle on when that could happen. But we were speculating the earliest that would happen would be middle June, and we're right about the middle of June, so we're getting into that territory. Like Malcolm talked about, we've had a lot of discussions on Buy America. I think a lot of people need to recognize and dig into Buy America to make sure you understand what you're talking about, because not everybody thinks, oh, Buy America. What you need to realize is there are some times where Buy America actually doesn't apply, and you need to look to make sure you dig in and get your facts straight on what your issues are with Buy America. And I think that's the biggest thing that needs to be very clear is get your facts straight on what the issues are. Talk to Caltrans. Caltrans is the leader in that, in making those decisions. We talk with Caltrans also, but work with Caltrans through Caltrans on that. But come to Caltrans with your facts, not we think this might be, but you need this is being moved here. This is exactly the amount, and this is what's happening with it. And I think that will help guide the discussion on that. I don't think I have anything else. I will be sitting right there to be close to a mic to respond to any of those types of questions if you have any. But does anybody have anything for me?
Anything for Vince? Okay, thanks, Vince.
All right.
I'm sure we'll hear from you later. Yeah. Okay, item number 9, regional agencies, moderator, Will.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Will Ritter with the San Joaquin Council of Governments on behalf of the Regional Transportation Planning Agencies. The RTPA group met yesterday with staff from Caltrans, the CTC, FHWA, and other partners to discuss a variety of activities and policies that are on the agenda for this morning. I would note that we held a very successful workshop in collaboration with Caltrans, the CTC, and FHWA, focusing on the streamlining of federal funding, looking to do more with less and consolidate federal funds on fewer projects. One of those items in particular was the update of the toll credit policy, which we significantly appreciate the department's efforts to revise that to ensure that that eligibility is extended to a variety of programs to once again ensure that we can consolidate federal funds on fewer projects to help streamline the delivery of projects. With respect to other items on the agenda of significance with respect to budget and allocation capacity that also had implications to the 2014 STIP fund estimate, and the regions recognize that there are significant uncertainty beginning in fiscal year 13-14 with various issues including the PTA funding, Article 19 funding, the active transportation program, as well as reconciling the future of T project programming. However, the regions do appreciate the Commission supporting the allocation schedule this month, including a significant number of T projects that also involve advances of those projects. With respect to the 2014 STIP guidelines, the regions appreciate the CTC staff efforts to update the STIP guidelines to ensure that there's clarification in the policies, and look forward to the July 18th workshop focused on the STIP guidelines. The regions do want to ensure that there's collaboration with the department in identifying the state highway needs that will be submitted to the Commission for consideration of how the regions are working in cooperation with the department to meet these needs, recognizing that many of these regions are actually using other funds beyond the STIP to address those state highway projects. With respect to the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund, the regions recognize the CTC staff's consideration of trying to streamline that policy to minimize the impacts on those projects currently in program but not meeting the June allocation requirements. Some of those in particular with respect to the Buy America requirements that I know have received a lot of consideration here over the last several months and a lot of effort going on. And the regions would like to ensure that what efforts are having to be demonstrated or minimized for those projects currently in the program, so that there could be minimal requirements of continuing to have them and potentially the opportunity to extend the deadline for some of those allocations to the August meeting, at which point in time it's targeted for that policy to be actually adopted. So to have a couple extra months for those projects that are on the cusp of being able to make the allocation requirements. I would also note that we recognized Mr. Weiss, Ms. Falsetti, and also Mr. Ambia in all of their contributions to statewide policy and project delivery. That was something that the regions did recognize yesterday. And then finally, we have a new moderator coming in for fiscal year 13-14, a new vice moderator. Our new moderator will be Adrian Cardoso from the Orange County Transportation Authority, and the new vice moderator will be Renee DeVry Oki from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for working with you over the last year. I appreciate it significantly. And goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good luck. Any questions for Will? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item number 10, Rural Counties Task Force. Sharon?
Good morning, Commissioners. Since our last meeting, we've had a Rural Counties Task Force on May 17th. Our focus was discussing funding. Will Kempton came and did a presentation on the future of transportation funding in California. That's a particular concern to the rural agencies because we're very challenged in terms of generating local funding. We also discussed the STIP guidelines, our interest in performance measures as they align with things that are important to rural areas. A lot of the things that are being discussed for transportation funding involve SB 375 and greenhouse gas reduction, which are absolutely important to the well-being of our state, but there are other issues that are of concern to the rural areas, just lifeline, transportation, and things like that. We have also been working on some joint projects as the Rural Counties Task Force. Collectively, the membership of the 26 rural agencies have gotten together, and we're funding a best practices for administration of our programs. This includes HR as well as funding. The other thing we're doing is we're funding a program to look at performance measures for developing regional transportation plans in rural areas. And so we'll be doing that together. One of our agencies will be lead for each of those, but we will post that for all our membership to participate in. The other area that obviously is of concern to us is Buy American. That is a challenge in a rural area. We plead to make sure that there is a clear line of communication between federal highways, the department, and the local agencies, so everyone is on the same page in terms of the progress in that area. And so with that, are there any questions?
Any questions of Sharon?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to item number 11, report from self-help counties. Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. The self-help counties are continuing our efforts to work with the department. As a matter of fact, we'll be meeting next week with them on working on efforts in terms of project delivery. And we're also working with the Secretary's office on an ongoing basis in terms of the new priorities being established as the transition works over into a Department of Secretary of Transportation. I also wanted to point out that we really look forward to seeing you in San Diego this fall for the Self-Help Focus on the Future conference. Always a highlight for the year, and the participation of this commission is great in being there. We as well are concerned about the Buy America provisions and are working with the department and the Secretary on that, and as well as working individually back in Washington, D.C. in regards to that particular issue. Something, though, I think I'd like to add, because I don't think we comment enough on it. This commission, back when Proposition 1B was passed, developed some very aggressive policies regarding delivery of the Prop 1B program. And by and large, it has been a tremendous success in doing so. I remember the former mayor of Stockton saying several times that she likely wouldn't have shown up at the State of the City address if she didn't have some good news to talk about in terms of transportation. So I think that we need to remember this as take a few blows every once in a while, and we wonder a little bit about our delivery efforts on the matter. This commission has put lots of people to work here in the state of California. The department has answered the call of this commission, and your partners represented out here have been there every step of the way to deliver what I think is tremendous success for the state of California during the recession that we've gone through over the last 4 years. So I'll offer this as the comments from South Bell County's coalition, and hope that you will find ways to continue to take a bow for your very aggressive stance in terms of project delivery.
Okay, Andy, thank you. A question, Fran? Andy?
Andy, I just have a question. What are the dates of the November conference?
You know, as I was coming up here, I accidentally lost my comments here. So, so I'm pulling them up as I speak right now, and it's November 18th and 19th in San Diego.
Thank you, Andy. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item number 12, state and federal legislative matters. Susan?
Commissioners, staff is monitoring 48 bills that meet the Commission's criteria. May 31st was the last day for bills to pass out of the House of Origin. 26 of the 48 bills were passed out of the House of Origin. Staff will continue to monitor all the bills, as some of these bills may be made into two-year bills. At this time, staff is not recommending action by the Commission with respect to the bills currently monitored. Staff would recommend that the Commission accept the staff report.
Do we need action on that?
Yes.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
Move it. Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tavallone, second by Commissioner Burke. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to item number 13, budget and allocation capacity. Mitch and Stephen.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioner. Stephen Keck with Caltrans. Today I'm going to start off my my presentation with a look at capital capacity for the current year. Through the last meeting, the Commission has allocated a net of about $2.8 billion towards many projects, including Proposition 1B projects. Today, I think the total is about $1.2 billion that's expected to be allocated on the agenda, which goes a long way towards pushing us to using all of the capacity in the current year. There will be some remaining capacity in the current year in both the Proposition 1B bonds and in the SHOP. Part of this is because projects are still being delivered in June, and will show up for the August vote. Any of that capacity, not related to bond programs that end today, but any of that capacity for the SHOP that rolls over into the next year will be available to allocate to those SHOP projects. We're not going to lose the capacity. It just rolls over to the next year. In terms of the budget, we haven't talked since the May Revise came out, and even since the May Revise came out, there has been some legislative action on many of the budget items, and I'll hit the highlights here real quickly. Both houses have taken action now to permanently redirect what we call the non-Article 19 funds from the State Highway account to the Transportation Debt Service Fund, and from there to the General Fund for General Fund relief. These revenues are essentially revenues that are not gas tax related and not weight fee related. These are revenues that come from the sale of property, excess property, from the sale of documents, and some other minor revenues that are not related to gas taxes. These had traditionally, or at least since 2000, been transferred to the public transportation account, but in recent years have been used to help the general fund for the crisis that we have been in, and now will be permanently redirected to the general fund. The Governor's Active Transportation Program was denied in both subcommittees without prejudice. Both subcommittees did express interest in continuing the negotiations, however, continuing the talks about this program. There was interest in seeing what kind of efficiencies could be gained with a consolidated program. I would not be surprised if there was more to come on this item. But as it stands now, we have backed that proposal out of the department's budget, and we'll see where that lands when the budget is adopted later this month. A couple other major highlights. The budget includes an appropriation of about $260 million for Proposition 1B next year, which you'll note is a fairly small number compared to where we have been with Prop 1B. This is marking the beginning of what I call the trailing edge of the Proposition 1B program. We've done a tremendous job delivering countless billions of dollars to projects. Now we're looking at sort of the last remaining programs. The amount is considerably lower than it has been. I will note that this number does not include any new appropriation for local PT MISIA, the public transit funds. There is still some of that older appropriation that will roll over into the next year, but there's no new appropriation in the budget at this point. Finally, we do have an increase in the budget for Amtrak operating services, about $18 million. This is related to federal law changes that require us to pay our fair share on all of our routes. It's been a long time in coming. There's been lots of negotiations with the Federal Rail Association, or excuse me, the agency, and that is now in our budget permanently. That comes from public transportation funds and helps to pay for all of our existing rail routes. We had two more programs finish up their zero-based budgeting, two smaller programs. We finished a review of the equipment program, which provides all of the orange trucks that you see out there, including our heavy equipment. This program, we're looking at increasing efficiencies, getting rid of some of our older fleet and replenishing that with newer equipment, which will allow us to realize long-term efficiencies and a reduction of about $12 million a year and about 40 positions that would otherwise maintain those vehicles. And then the stormwater program, which we've talked about stormwater before, it's a changing requirements on how we report stormwater issues and deal with them. That zero-based review ended up with a net increase of 25 positions, but we're going to fund that through a redirection of existing contract dollars that were for stormwater, so no net increase in the cost of the program. And finally, I'll end with preliminary allocation capacity for next year. These numbers are very similar to what we saw in the current year. For the STIP and for the SHOP, it's a little bit lower than the current year. What these numbers do not include is any of that rollover capacity I talked about in the very beginning. After we account for all the votes that happened today, we'll update the Commission in August on what that rollover capacity would be, and it will be included in next year's allocation capacity. We have a TBD here in bonds for the same reason. We need to account for all the votes that happened today, take into account any deallocations that may occur, and then we'll provide the new capacity at the next meeting. And that ends my presentation.
Mitchell, did you want to add?
Yes, I'd like to address a couple things. Stephen has the preliminary allocation capacity up there. We've taken a very quick look at how we think that impacts us next year. As some of you may recall, a year ago at this time, we thought we may have an allocation problem in 13-14 because we have an unusually large percentage of capital dollars in the program compared to support. Our preliminary estimate is that we're about 20% short in allocation capacity, about half of which is attributable to the T funds no longer being in the program. So we're going to take a further look, refine that, make sure our numbers are, once a budget's signed, make sure our numbers are consistent with the budget and go through the numbers again. I think at this point, it looks like there may be a need for an allocation plan. If there is, we will bring it on the agenda in August.
Thank you, Mitch. Commissioner Arp?
Yes, just Just one quick observation and one question. In terms of you're looking at $67 million a year in non-Article 19 funds. Does that include, like, when we sell right of way, it doesn't go back in transportation, it goes into the general fund, right?
So it does include when we sell excess land, and it does go back into transportation to pay for debt service on transportation bonds.
Okay, and if you look at, this does not include, there's about $130 million a year that's being taken out of HUDA, which probably doesn't go on your ledger sheet, I don't know, does it?
So you're referring to the
I'm referring
the loan of HUDA funds that goes to the general fund?
I haven't heard it described as a loan.
Well, okay, in that case, I'm not quite familiar with the question.
It was a Department of Finance move last year and repeated this year, and it's $130 million a year taken out of local government for rehab.
For off-highway?
I believe you might be referring to the off-highway portion of the excise tax. Does that sound correct?
It might be off-highway. Does that make it different? Does that make it okay? I'm just trying to get when we're looking at the needs that we have, anything that's taken out of fuel, I'm just keeping track is all.
Oh, fair enough. And so, but in terms of the off-highway funds, what those are it's an accounting of the fuel used off the highway system, and therefore the taxes paid on that fuel are transferred to off-highway uses.
Yeah, and that was really part of that was an unintended consequence of the gas tax swap. Before, when there was the sales tax, all the money was coming into the highway or road transportation or public transportation, and there wasn't the off-highway vehicle portion coming off. When it became an excise tax, there was an existing statute related to off-highway vehicles coming off, and so that caused that diversion, if you will.
It's a reflection of priority, basically. You figure out someplace else to take the money. My priority is that if it was related to transportation, maybe we ought to try to keep it there. That's all.
I would not argue with that, sir.
Where's the aviation fuel tax going?
So the fuel tax on avgas, as they call it, and on the 2 cents we have on jet fuel goes into the aeronautics account for uses in aeronautics.
Yeah, but isn't that getting swept into the general fund also?
So there was a transfer to the general fund of, I forget the amount of last year. We are not planning on any more of those.
I think every year I've been on the commission, it's been transferred into the general fund. Any other questions? Commissioner Inman?
I have a related question. In my day job, I attended a workshop with the Water Resources Board on the trash amendment, and I was reminded of that with your bullet point that talked about 25 new positions as we dealt with stormwater issues. So I want to encourage our transportation stakeholders to participate because there was much discussion between our rail partners and our roads about the trash amendment, and I think you might be adding a few more positions if we don't get that right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Commissioner, if I may, real quick, the other point I wanted to make, and this was related to Commissioner Arp's question, this is what's referred to as a non-Article 19 revenues. As Stephen mentioned, that's a transfer that started in 2000 to the public transportation account. The reason that transfer was put in place was the impending shortfalls in the public transportation account. They were going to be running into the negative. LAO had done a write-up, I believe it was in 1999, with a long-term forecast, and it was not sustainable. The non-Article 19 transfer started. In the intervening years, there was some spillover and some increased revenues to the PTA, much of which was diverted, but that put off the solvency issues in the public transportation account. Now, with the increased funding to state transit assistance, getting a greater percentage of the diesel, the state sales tax on diesel, and with the ongoing diversion of the non-Article 19 revenues, I think when we take a long-term look at the cash situation in the public transportation account, we're going to be running into solvency issues again.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, at this time I'd like to recognize Senator Mark Desaulniers, who's joined us. Look, it's always a pleasure to have you, Senator. Okay, item number 14, draft 2014 STIP fund estimate.
So today I will present the results of the draft fund estimate. I'll start by reminding the Commission where we ended off last time. We adopted the assumptions for use in preparing this draft fund estimate. Some of the major assumptions that we adopted were looking at what we figured the economy would do and how that will impact revenues over the fund estimate period. We adopted a baseline federal estimate of federal resources that is equal to what was received in the current year. And a minor dollar-wise but somewhat political assumption that we made was that we would receive transfers from the motor vehicle account into the state highway account of quote-unquote funds not immediately needed in the motor vehicle account. This was a transfer that has not ever occurred as far as we are aware, but it is in law that if the funds are not needed, they would be transferred to the state highway account. Taking those and a huge packet of other assumptions into account, we developed the draft 2014 fund estimate, the detailed results of which are included in the book item itself. This is a summary table that shows revenue coming in, and of course the big question, which is what is the target capacity for the STIP in the shop. Over the 5-year period, we're looking at a capacity for the STIP of about $3.3 billion. This is slightly lower than the 2012 fund estimate, and again, this is related mostly to the elimination of the TE from the federal budget. Over the 5-year period, the shop capacity is about $11.4 billion. And in general, the fund estimate, as we've created it and as we continue to look at it, we expect to make some more refinements. We found at least one error in one of our spreadsheets that we'll fix as we go forward to the final. But most notably, we will be updating the current year capacity for the STIP. What is shown on this chart is a bit low. So we will be fixing that with our next, with the final and the fund estimate, which will not affect the capacity within the 5-year period, but does affect the capacity the year before the 5-year period and may affect what rolls into the fund estimate. So we'll be cleaning that up with the next iteration. There are some open issues still that would need to be closed out before we finalize the fund estimate. These are all related to the budget. And I'll briefly go through these. There was, of course, any changes there may be to general fund relief. We just talked about Article 19. If the budget is passed the way it currently is, which does match the administration's proposal, there will be no change in the fund estimate, but any change to the way it is now will affect the fund estimate. Active Transportation Program, again, as I said, probably won't have much effect on the fund estimate itself, but we will account for any changes that may occur if there are changes to the ATP as it goes forward. And essentially, those are the only open items, and as I mentioned, we'll be doing a little bit of cleanup with the fund estimate itself. And then as we go through a workshop on July 18th, we'll be we're looking at any changes we might have to this fund estimate and taking any comments and suggestions from the public and the Commission. The adoption of the fund estimate is currently scheduled for the August meeting, which is August 6th, and we'll be presenting the final fund estimate at that point.
Commissioners, just to follow up on what Stephen said, first I would note there's a yellow and a pink in your handouts related to the county shares, and that we will be holding a workshop on the fund estimate and a hearing on the STIP guidelines on July 18th. Second, as far as the numbers Stephen had up there, again, they're preliminary. draft. There will be some changes. However, based on those numbers, we're underfunded by about 12% in the first few years of the STIP, again, related to the loss of T funding. What we would hope at that relatively small level of underfunding is that with the schedule updates that occur every STIP cycle and with the deletion of some projects that may, T projects that may no longer be regional or Caltrans priorities, we'll resolve most of that. However, there may be a need to take some of our currently programmed projects and delay them if we don't have sufficient schedule updates or deletion of T projects. And we will discuss this more at the workshop and then bring the fund estimate back for adoption in August.
Okay, any questions from either Stephen or Mitch? All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 15, draft 2014 STIP guidelines. Mitchell?
This is an informational item. The draft guidelines were presented as a pink in your packet. It includes a schedule for the 2014 STIP, starting with a hearing and workshop on July 18th through adoption of the STIP scheduled for March 19th of next year. The item includes several things, most important of which is the highlights. We've tried to just summarize both the guidelines for the STIP cycle and changes to the permanent STIP guidelines. In terms of the highlights to this cycle, what we're noting is that existing T projects can remain in the STIP as long as they're eligible for one of our other fund types. So bike and pedestrian projects, which can be funded with state highway account or other fund sources, can remain in the STIP if they are still a regional or interregional priority. We have a list of things that can no longer be federally funded, such as museums. There are some VISTA areas, things like that. Those will have to be deleted by the region or by Caltrans if they have those type of projects. Additionally, if regions have T reserves, they will need to delete those, and they can use those shares for other projects. We're also in our guidelines have the priorities, commission priorities, and similar to what we've done in the past, we would give first priority to reprogram projects from the 2012 STIP. So the existing projects get the first priority. And our next priority would be new projects in counties that did not program up to their minimum in the 2012 STIP. It's a small number of counties. It's not a big dollar amount, but they're the counties whose shares we need to fulfill first. Those are the highlights for the guidelines specific to the cycle. In addition, there's significant and more significant than we've had in a number of years proposals to amend the permanent guidelines. They include changes to the criteria for measuring performance and cost effectiveness. We're proposing to lower the dollar threshold for project-specific reporting from $50 million to $20 million. And we're adding a criteria related to stormwater, because that has become an issue, and also related to vehicle miles traveled. We're proposing some additional reporting to be included in the regional, the RTIPs and the ITIPs. This would include an identification of, for the RTIPs, a discussion of the state highway and intercity rail needs that are identified by Caltrans. Now, this is something we've had in the STIP guidelines for a couple of STIP cycles, but unfortunately, the regions have never received it from Caltrans in time to include it and discuss it in their RTIP. Again, we have a specific date. I've spoken with some of the Caltrans staff. They need to get it to the regions in the middle of September for the regions to then discuss what the state has identified as the needs in their RTIP. We're not saying that what Caltrans identifies as the needs has to be programmed in the RTIP, but we just want to understand what the different priorities are and why different things are being selected. We're also asking for an expanded reporting on completed projects. There currently is a reporting requirement for regional agencies to report on completed projects. We're asking for that information to be included in the RTIP so we can just see what got completed between RTIPs, what was planned, and what it ended up costing. We're also asking for some additional information to be submitted in the ITIP related to environmental impacts of projects that are planned. And we're proposing to expand the objectives of the intercity rail program to include a discussion of projects that would complement the state's planned high-speed rail system. There are a number of areas which we believe are clarifications of our existing policies and areas where we're trying to improve things, such as right-of-way. We've had a number of projects that were allocated with 3W certification, which additional right-of-way purchases are being made after the allocation. In those instances, we require the deferral of the final estimate until they complete a higher level of certification, so we have a better estimate of what the cost is on those projects. We're proposing to add to the list of commission priorities projects that leverage discretionary local funds that would otherwise not be spent for a transportation-related purpose. And then we're making significant changes to the performance measures, indicators section, which is Appendix B of the STIP guidelines. Many of these are in line with a project that's being led by SANDAG, where they're coordinating with the MPOs to try to get a standardized list of reporting, and so we are piggybacking on that and including many of the things that they're including, but we're also including some things that Commission staff liked also. So I urge everybody to take a look at all these. As I said, we're going to have a hearing. We're open to input from the public and regional agencies on any of these issues, and I look forward to having a discussion about them.
You want to repeat the schedule again, Mitch?
Yes, I would love to repeat the schedule again. We will be having a hearing on July 18th on the STIP guidelines and a fund estimate workshop to go over the two of those. They are scheduled for adoption at the Commission's August meeting. By statute, the RTIPs and the ITIPs are required to be submitted by December 15th, and the schedule for STIP adoption is the March 19th Commission meeting.
Thank you. Any questions of Mitch? Commissioner Dunn?
Mitch, in listening to your words, and I will admit that I need to study this more, I just want to make sure that as funding continues to get more constrained and smaller, that we're not just adding a lot of stuff for our locals to do that costs them more to use less state funding. I mean, it's hard enough now that we're making the state, in very respectful terms, irrelevant for our transportation system because we have no funding. But I don't want us to turn into the federal government, all due respect, Vince Mamano, by making it even harder as opposed to efficient to use the funding that is remaining. So would you please do another check, bench check, of the rules and regs that you're setting up, your STIP amendments, STIP guidelines, to make sure that efficiency and effectiveness are there, not just make work and more expense at the local level? Because we've got to let their local dollars go even farther than they ever have before now, too. Is that a good philosophy to look at?
I think that's great. You know, we had looked at a Buy California policy, but decided we weren't going to do that.
Thank you, Mitch.
But
I got Vince in my target today, so.
And again, I completely agree, and that's why when we looked at, for example, increasing the performance measurement and indicators, well, that we tried to piggyback on another effort that's really looking at what's already being done.
Right.
Our intention is not that somebody goes out and does something new. Our expectation is that everybody goes out. Everybody is going out and doing this at some level. And so when we're asking for information, about VMT estimates, for example, that's already being collected by certainly all the large MPOs. And if a small region wasn't collecting that or wasn't estimating that there's latitude in the guidelines that they don't have to report on it.
Looking for a filter. That's
yep.
all.
We're
Commissioner
I'm still trying to get my head around how you're going to be factoring in stormwater costs in this whole projection, because from everything that I can see, it's going to cost a lot of money. We haven't; those final regs are just some of us have been fighting hard to try to put some rationale and reasoning into those regulations, but it's going to be an increasingly expensive component of a project. I noticed from Stephen's report, it doesn't look like it's going to make that much difference from a personnel standpoint, but to me, that's not the real cost we're dealing with. It has to do with the mitigation and compliance.
Yes, and that's something that really impacts what gets done at the project level, not so much our guidelines. What we're talking about is a higher level. How we're trying to get at what's the impact of the projects that are proposed on stormwater, because stormwater is a compliance is a significant issue. So if there were some project that's having a significant impact on stormwater runoff, then we just want to understand and make sure people are looking at it. Presumably they are. But again, I appreciate any feedback people have on how we can improve that area.
Yeah. Some of us deal with that on a regular basis, not in our day jobs other than transportation. And one of the ideas we floated, but I don't think we've gotten legislative support yet, maybe our two legislators at the end can help us with this, but it seems silly to clean up water on a project-by-project basis. We have projects, for example, in Oakland where they're forcing us to clean 1 acre and then it gets dumped into a dirty 120-year-old sewer system and gets dirty again. I think the answer to this needs to be scientific, and I think we need to start looking at these things as a drainage basin by drainage basin. We have a mechanism out there. Most communities have flood control agencies, which they have taxing authority. They have the ability to clean up a central basin where we're going to clean the water and then discharge it. So I would hope that maybe we can get some legislation that would cover that and give the Regional and State Water Quality Control Board better direction than just doing a project by project. Pay a fee and into a master cleanup plan makes a lot more sense than a project by project. So I hope somebody's listening down there.
What did you say? Mr. Chairman?
Senator.
Just a comment. Our committee sent out a letter to all the what we considered affected stakeholder groups under the jurisdiction of the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee to see if there were things that were impacting their ability to provide jobs and economic stimulus. The number one thing we got back was this issue. So we're planning on having a hearing on it. Anything we can do with the Commission here would be helpful, and I'm certainly sure we could do it with the Assembly Committee as well. But it was interesting that was the number one thing that came back from contractors and other groups as well.
It's a real problem. I have a project that's basically a ditch. It's not even a creek, and we've been held up on a 401 permit, a simple thing, for 3 months now, going through this thing. It's ridiculous. But I think you ought to include in these discussions the flood control agency, because I think that's the mechanism that we can use to help solve this problem.
Well, and obviously the water quality boards, both the state and the regional ones. But we don't want to get you stuck in a ditch, Mr. Chairman. So.
No, thank you. All right, any other questions? Thank you, Mitch. All right, moving on to a very short item. Let's move to item number 16, Buy America. Susan and Brent.
Commissioners, agenda item 16 is an update on Buy America from Caltrans. Brent Green, Chief of Caltrans Right-of-Ways here. In addition, I believe that Representatives Valerie Wynn, Manager of State Agency Relations for PG&E, is also here, and Roderick Brewer from Southern California Edison is also here today. So I will turn it over to Brent.
Thank you, Susan. Chair Gilmenick, Commissioners, good morning. As I was introduced, I am with the Division of Right-of-Way and Land Surveys, which includes the Office of Utility Relocation, and I can let you know that both my day job and my evening job this last month or two has been Buy America. Today I'm going to give a brief update on what the challenges we're facing are, a little bit about the information sharing, some of the solutions we're working on, and some of the next steps. Of course, I don't think anybody disputes that the overall intent of Buy America, which is to ensure purchases preserve and create jobs and promote our economy, especially in the critical manufacturing sectors, does make sense. However, in the near term, for the transportation community in California, Buy America has resulted in the unintended effect of doing just the opposite. Many current projects, some of which I'll describe later, and those coming up, are being delayed, which will result in a loss of jobs, prevent multi-millions of dollars from going into our economy. Since the last Commission meeting, Buy America has been a focal point of interest in the transportation industry. There have been aggressive efforts in a variety of areas to address the impacts of Buy America. My guess is that probably 90% of the people in this room have had one or more discussions about Buy America in the last month, because it is a significant issue for us. I know that there's been many efforts by legislators, local governments, regional agencies, MPOs, CalCog, SCAG, utility owners, Caltrans. It's definitely been a huge issue for all of us, and we've all been engaged with one another. Our goal in Caltrans, of course, is to find a solution that works for all our stakeholders, both state and regional. Just a little bit of education, because I think, as Vince mentioned, it's not as well understood as what some people think. Buy America is only for products that are predominantly of steel and iron, and that's defined as something that's 90% steel or iron content when it's delivered to the job site for installation. Why is Buy America such an issue now after MAP 21? Buy America is not new. It's been around for a long, long time, but MAP 21 contains a provision that amends Buy America by broadening the scope of application of this provision. The amendment substantially broadens the application of Buy America to any contract eligible for federal highway funding within the scope of the applicable finding, determination, or decision under NEPA, regardless of the funding source of such contracts, if at least one contract for the project is funded with federal aid. And I think in layman's terms, that means that prior to MAP 21, utility owners did not have to comply with Buy America unless they used federal funds. After MAP 21, if it's federally eligible, they do have to comply with Buy America if any contract uses federal funds, even if the utility relocation does not use federal funds. So that's the major difference. Very briefly, there are situations, as Vince mentioned, when you can still be Buy America compliant without having steel and iron that's domestically made, and that's if the relocation is temporary or if the location is 100% the responsibility of the owner. And there have been many projects in the last month that we've solved on that basis. I've got a very brief report on where we are in terms of communication and with the utility owners. Caltrans has, for the last couple of months, been working with 5 major utility companies, 2 more than the others, and that's PG&E and Southern California Edison, who we had mentioned earlier, are here. The other ones that we're involved with are AT&T, Los Angeles Department of Water, Power, and Verizon. All 5 of these has come out in writing, stated in writing to the director, that none have said they don't want to comply. All have said they're currently unable to comply, and they're working toward compliance. Generally speaking, all of the letters, they've cited the same basic constraints that they have, and I'll list 4, and I'll let the owners talk to more later. But the common 4 are this inability to verify or certify the material compliance of what they have in stock, to evaluate the materials in their supply chain, concerns or at least the need to vet the durability and safety of the Buy America compliance that they have to acquire. The main one really, I think, is insufficient time and guidance, and I think that's why we've talked a little bit about today about a potential phase-in strategy. Just a little bit about what Caltrans has been working on the last month, in addition to several others. We've had weekly meetings with the utility owners, sometimes twice a week. We're very fluid now. We're sharing information back and forth on an ongoing basis. Same with FHWA. They've been very engaged in a lot of meetings. They've been very helpful. Although Vince says we shouldn't panic too much, they're not always as easy as they might appear on the surface, and so FHWA has been extremely committed on those situations to help us work through the cobwebs to figure out whether the projects are compliant or not and what we need to do about it. We've also developed a task force, which is a multi-divisional task force that encompasses many divisions because it touches a lot of different areas. We're using that effectively to help work through it. Just as of last Friday, we've appointed Gary Gutierrez, who's right there on that post, as our exclusive project manager to work with Buy America. So I'm hoping that it'll just be my night job and not my day job. And maybe next time he'll be up here. He's very, very competent. I think you're going to really enjoy working with him. And we've had, I think I jokingly said the other day, but I think it's honest, that we've probably had easily in the department over 100 meetings just since last commission meeting focused exclusively to Buy America. It's been very, very intense. All the stakeholders seem to share the same goals, and that's to prevent the loss of federal OA, prevent the loss of project funding, prevent job loss. And what's really on our critical path right now is we're to the point where we can attack on a project-by-project basis those critical, highest priority projects for solutions. And of course, we're also working as quickly as we can to overcome any concerns or any need for additional guidance that the utility owners have regarding Buy America. I know that during the last month, as was mentioned earlier, there have been numerous coalitions that have met with federal DOT and federal highways in Washington, D.C. Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Dunn have been extremely engaged this last month in Buy America. They could probably be standing here and giving the same presentation. They've been very engaged, and I'm hoping maybe they'll offer a few words after I'm done. I think the most common strategy or the most discussed strategy back in Washington, D.C. has been the concept of a phase-in or ramp-up plan. There have been other discussions on waivers, but I think the ramp-up plan has been the most talked about. We had what we really consider a breakthrough here a few weeks ago when one of the coalitions led by Commissioner Dunn, there seemed to be at least an acceptance to consider a phase-in strategy in that present us a plan of what that would look like, and we'll see if it's permissible. And at this point, during that meeting, Southern California Edison was tasked to develop what that plan might look like and present it to federal highways. Southern California Edison has not completed that plan. We don't have any date from them on when that will be completed. We're hoping soon. I think we've made the mental shift at this point that we can't wait any longer for plans, so we're trudging ahead forward. And that'll be maybe one of the strategies that we talk about a little bit later. Waivers, I'm going to touch very briefly on waivers because a lot of people think, well, let's just get a waiver. There are waivers available. There's a process for that. But waivers are extremely high bar because, generally speaking, they're inconsistent with the overall intent of Buy America. So it's a fairly rigorous process. They do require going on the Federal Register. It takes about a year to get a waiver. On national waivers, they're very rarely granted, but we know already, working closely with utility owners, that there will be materials that are not compliant and are not available domestically, and we will need waivers. So no matter what solution we come up with, that will be something that we'll need to do in the long run. So we're working. PG&E has already proposed a couple of products that they believe are non-compliant, not domestically made. So we're going to work with them and others toward that waiver process. Current impacts. I know that's probably what everybody's waiting for me to get to. The discussion of a list of projects that are impacted has been widely discussed. And I know that from the state side, we know that currently there's about 9 projects in construction with a construction value of $3.9 billion that have impacts due to Buy America, and another 39 projects valued at $1.5 billion that either have been brought to the Commission or will very shortly. Last Commission meeting, there were 5 projects that were not voted due to Buy American constraints, and there will be another 6 projects today. The regional agencies have also developed a list. They're still vetting that list under certain criteria. We think that we're pretty close to being done. So I would assume that they would have probably similar numbers in terms of number of projects impacted. So I'm guessing we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 or 90 projects altogether. And I know there was a question that came up about TCIF funds or other fund sources, and if we clear those constraints, are we clear to go? And the answer is no. We've got many projects on the docket that have issues. Next steps, I know that it's beyond my purview, but I know there are some legislative options being considered both nationally and the state level, which I don't have the details on, but I know there's some ideas there. The policy-based decisions are the second proposed solution. That has to do with the phase-in strategy. And of course, the whole intent of getting these lists is to prioritize the list for those projects that are on the critical path, those that are going to be stopped in construction, involve a lot of federal dollars, involve job loss, involve those things. So the whole intent was to get these lists, to prioritize them, and go project by project right down the list and try to address those. We're to that point now, and FHWA has provided us a single focal point to do that. And starting, I think, tomorrow or Thursday, we're going to go project by project on a priority basis and see what we can do. Because our hope is, and what we have found the last month, is that there are projects that will fall out, meaning there are projects very likely on these lists that we can find a solution to. I don't know how many, but we know that there's no simple formula. And another thing I could mention is FHWA is committed to doing a decision matrix or a matrix to help guide both the state and the regional agencies through how to make the determination of those kinds of decisions. So with that, I'll entertain questions, and if they're really difficult, then I've got PG&E and SCE to hopefully answer
Susan,
them.
did you want to add anything to Brent's presentation?
No, other than over this last month, Caltrans has been working very hard, and I do understand that there's a list that Southern California has also identified a number of projects, and I do know that Caltrans is working through that with the regions, and I think, one of the, maybe for everyone in the room here, the local assistance projects, to hopefully the local agencies are paying very close attention and working closely with Caltrans on this as well.
Okay. I have 3 speaker cards before I get to questions from the Commission. If anyone else desires to speak, they have speaker cards at the end table down there. Commissioner Arp, did you have a question?
I do, but I'm going to wait till I hear the speakers.
Okay.
Is that a
quick
question for Brent? What are some of the products that are impacted?
Projects?
Products.
Oh, products. The only one that really comes to mind off the top of my head is a valve. PG&E has mentioned there's a certain valve that they haven't been able to identify that's produced domestically. I know that in the construction industry, which I have a little bit more familiarity with, with guardrail and these kinds of things, there's a lot of componentry that's involved in utilities, a lot of component parts, and some of it's not as clear as a guardrail and what does and doesn't need to be compliant. So I don't know any more than that.
Okay.
Well, if I can add, I think there's 2 layers to that. Current inventory in general is an issue with some of the utility companies because they can't necessarily vouch for its history and where it came from. And then there's another layer to it is there may be some devices like valves that are not available domestically. So I think there's several layers to that question.
Yeah, maybe I could add that the way in the construction side that we verify compliance is we have a mill test report, and oftentimes Caltrans has source inspectors that go out to Ohio or wherever they are and actually look at the materials, look at the specifications, and do that. And at least at this point, my understanding is that utility owners don't have a process in place, at least, to drill that deep to get that kind of information.
Okay, any other questions before we call the first speaker? All right, the first speaker is Valerie Nguyen, PG&E.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Valerie Nguyen, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about PG&E's efforts to come into compliance with the Buy America requirements. I heard from an earlier speaker that we really need to focus on facts when it comes to Buy America, and so I'm hoping that I can share some of the factual information with you that we've been learning as we assess our supply chain. As Mr. Green noted, we have been actively working with Caltrans to, better understand the Buy America requirements, to identify which utility relocation projects are actually affected by the new requirements, to develop mutually acceptable contractual language, and also to identify a fair and reasonable product certification process. And at the same time, we've been working with Caltrans, and we've had numerous meetings with them over the last month. We've had a number of internal meetings as well, and we've been working with diligently working with our supply chain to understand which types of equipment need to comply with Buy America, which ones we could source domestically but may not be currently, and which pieces are not available domestically at all. So far, we've surveyed 19 of our distributors and suppliers who provide over 1,200 pieces of equipment that are used in utility relocation projects. And so as we identify additional products or projects that need to comply with Buy America, we are continuing to add to that product list. So it continues to grow as the scope of our understanding grows as well. So while our assessment today on our supply chain is preliminary, we are cautiously optimistic that more analysis is going to show that going forward, the majority of the materials that we use in our utility relocation projects can be certified as Buy America compliant, provided we have sufficient timing and funding and that sufficient supplies are available domestically to achieve that. But we can't achieve that overnight. We've been hearing from vendors that to change the source of materials currently, it could take 12 weeks or more to start getting that supply in and to get it delivered to jobs. And so absent receipt of that compliant material or reasonable project waivers or phase-ins, we are really concerned that significant job-creating highway projects within California could be delayed. However, as I indicated, we are cautiously optimistic that we can source most of this material domestically, but we do understand that key materials needed for utility relocation projects can only be acquired today from a non-domestic source. And that would be those gas pipeline valves that you've been hearing about. They certainly fall into that category. We have been looking at how could we develop a domestic supply chain for those critical materials, but that would certainly take a considerable amount of time to identify a foundry, test the equipment, determine if it meets our pretty exacting safety and reliability requirements, and then to have sufficient manufacture of that pipe available, or that valve, available to us. So as we've been looking at these particular gas pipeline relocation projects, one of the things that we learn, of course, is that as we look, say, at the Cordelia Highway project at I-680 and 80, that's a $750 million project, of which PG&E's utility relocation project is about $13.5 million. These gas pipeline valves that I just mentioned, the total cost of those, we estimate each one ranges from about $20,000 to over $20,000 each. And in total, it's about $200,000. So that one piece of material that really is a fraction of the overall job cost is causing delays and concerns for us there. So it's just an example of the real and critical challenges we face as we try to comply with this law. So as we noted earlier, we're working with Caltrans and the U.S. Department of Transportation on a waiver or a reasonable transition period. And also with respect to particular products like the gas valve, there may need to be a special exception granted for those types of equipment until some alternative domestic supply could be identified. We share Caltrans' commitment to working with regulators and policymakers to develop fair and common sense solutions to these challenges so that these highway projects that are really key economic and job creation engines for our local economies, so that these projects aren't delayed. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Inman.
Valerie, it's great to have you with us today and appreciate it. It seems to me like we really have to quickly drill to the specifics. And when we talk about a price tag, a project with a price tag of $750 million, that would bubble to the top, I would think, pretty quickly. So how can we get to the sense of urgency? I realize I want to be respectful of all our partners here, but I think that do you all have a point person that's focused exclusively? We've heard from Caltrans and some of our partners that they're, 24/7 onto this. So do we have an expert that we're generating, no pun intended here, in terms of our utility partners as well, to really be our point person and our go-to person to get our critical path forward?
I would say at PG&E we have a multifunctional, cross-functional team working on this. In California right now, I'm serving as the point person with Caltrans, but our core team includes people from our Federal Affairs Office, from our supply chain vendors, in our electric distribution and gas distribution and transmission operations folks. It's a real cross-functional team.
Okay. Some of the letters that we received talked about some PUC requirements. Can you help us understand what kind of timing we might be facing if we need to go that route?
That's a good question. Some of the CPUC requirements can include that there are certain standards that are established for the equipment that we use. And so to go about initiating any change in a standard or a change in those requirements, those proceedings at the CPUC can take up to 18 months to move through that process.
Yikes.
Yes, they have been known to deal with things on a much more expedited basis, and I think that could be done if we identify certain actions that the CPUC would need to take on this.
Okay, so I think it behooves all of us in the sector to really, first of all, look in our mirrors and make sure that we are developing this list that is so important, because clearly you all, this isn't the only thing our utility partners worry about on a daily basis, so we need to really have a good list to work from and kind of prioritize. But I also think that, what are you hearing from all your colleagues across the United States? Because this is a federal law, and I know there are some states where utility relocation costs are not allowed to be funded through transportation. So I did offer that up to our partners in the South, and they weren't jumping for joy on that one. But what else is happening? Because this isn't just specific to California.
No, it's not, and I would say that PG&E is working with Southern California Edison and AT&T and Verizon and others at the federal level as well, through the Edison Electric Institute and through other stakeholder organizations, to advance the concerns that exist with many utilities across the country.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you, Valerie. Welcome. Again, I'm glad you mentioned EEI, because that was going to be my question. I was hoping that the Edison representative would also speak to this. But when we were last in Washington, D.C., it was EEI that was going to be approached to develop the guidance from the utility side to present to Secretary LaHood. Do you know the status of that process? There's guidance both ways. Guidance that needs to come from DOT, guidance that needs to come from the utilities, and then hopefully you'll marry somewhere quickly before $20,000 stops a $750 million project. Have you heard any of the movement developed from EEI on this?
I think one of the items that EEI is waiting for from the utilities is going to be more specifics. And so some of the information I shared with you today on those specifics are going to be what we share with EEI over the next week or two to help move things forward.
Okay. So you think that that would happen? I'm looking for timing on what might come out of EEI to get back to Deputy Secretary Percari.
I don't
Any
have
idea?
specifics on that timing. I'd be happy to check with our federal
If you would,
office
that would
and
be
share
really
that with you.
helpful.
Okay.
One of what we're struggling with is so many of our projects, this federal funding is time-based, and we're going to lose it, in addition to mothballing projects. So meshing timing as well as information requires some really smart people to work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arp?
Just full disclosure, I am a supporter of Buy America. I think it's a good program fundamentally. In my whole life, I've never owned a car that wasn't an American car. The only exception to that is my wife has a Honda Accord, which after 40 years of marriage, one thing I've learned is I'm not going to dictate to my wife what she's going to drive. So That's the way it is. But I'll bet anything that not one of those cars I drive now or have ever driven is got all American-made parts in it. And there's parts that come in from all over the world to make that American-made car. It seems to me that, the fundamental purpose of Buy America is to promote American jobs. And if we have a situation here where you're going through this excruciating process to try to figure out what you've got in your inventory that was made in America and what wasn't, whether or not you have a clear chain to be able to track that down. Contractors are going through the same process. They're shaking their heads. They don't know what to do in some cases. It seems to me that if we're really looking at trying to make sure that jobs are created, I have in my pocket here, which was given to us, just a partial list of what looks like a tip of the iceberg, $252 million worth of projects currently at risk in California, and I don't think that includes everything. It seems like rational heads ought to get together and figure out, we talked about the phased-in process, which I've heard that the federal government isn't that interested in a phased-in. Right. I could be wrong, but it seems like looking at something like a 95 to 97% Buy America certification or whatever, if there's 2 or 3% that you can't identify, that might cover your valves. It might cover a couple of other things, and we could get on down the road and get these projects built and figure out what we can do down the road on the supply chain to make it as pure as we can. But in the meantime, we got a huge problem here of logistics and bureaucracy and red tape, and a lot of jobs are at stake, and we could lose some funding out of this too. And to me, that's what we really ought to be looking at. I'm curious. PG&E retains. I'm a union member in my regular life. I think labor had a lot to do with Buy America. But has labor? Have you gone to your labor counterparts that you have collective bargaining agreements with? Are they weighing in on this to try to help solve the problem? Are we all working on this together? Are we all on the same page? Sorry, I've been rather exercised about this.
No, I appreciate that.
Did I say?
You need to yell at Vince, not
Valerie.
It's okay. There were two.
I'm not going to yell at Vince. I'll just probably punch him out when I get a chance.
I think there were really two parts to your comments. First, is there some threshold level that says if 90% of your project costs are Buy America, can't you get a free pass? And then the second piece was, are we working with the labor unions? And I could say definitely on the second part, yes, we're working with the labor unions. They're certainly part of our outreach in the D.C. area at the federal level, and we've also been working with our own internal labor relations folks to engage the unions as well on this issue. On the second piece of whether there is some sort of a threshold level, there is a limited provision in the law, as I understand it, that says if it's a de minimis amount for the project, if it's $2,500 or less, then you don't have to meet the Buy America requirements. But there's no specific exemption or exclusion for material costing, as part of a larger project. There's no particular exemption or exclusion for that. And that's something that, as we've noted, is very challenging when $200,000 of materials can delay an entire project.
It seems to me that those are areas I don't want to put it all on the federal side of this. I think that if it becomes clear that any of the utilities are gaming this at all or trying to play chicken or whatever, and I'm not accusing you of that, but if it becomes clear that that's part of this equation, we're going to lose a lot of credibility and this problem will not get solved.
No, I understand that, and we're very committed to coming into compliance with the law. It's just that it's taking time, and there appear to be some short-term unintended consequences associated with that.
Any other questions? Valerie, this law went into effect, I believe, September of 2012.
October 1st, 2012. Mm-hmm.
And that's about 9 months ago. And it seems to me you can find the socks in the sock drawer, in that length of time. I'm a little dismayed that you haven't found out, either your own supply chain or allow us just to go out and buy new material that we know is Buy America. The valve question, if they're not made in the U.S. currently, I'm sure there are a lot of foundries out there right now that would love to have your specifications, and they could probably produce what you want in about 30 days. I don't think there's much effort on the part of the utilities to solve this problem. And I really do think it's I hate to use this word, but maybe it's some sort of conspiracy that's going on between the utility companies nationwide, because the problem doesn't seem to be isolated just to the state of California. I'm really dismayed at the actions of the utility companies. You have a big bureaucracy. You're probably as large as Caltrans, which is another big bureaucracy. But we're sitting up here as commissioners trying to get the dollars out the door, put people to work, and get these jobs built. And you guys are becoming big obstacles. There's hardly any creativity in solving this problem on the part of PG&E or Southern California Edison. I'm deeply disappointed.
Thank you for that feedback. I would like to know, I think part of the challenge we face is that this was one element in a large federal bill that caught many of us unaware. We were not aware that this was in the bill, and in fact, I just learned about the Buy America requirement myself within the last month and a half. And we've been actively working with Caltrans.
Well, you ought to place your lobbyists back in Washington, D.C. then.
Mr. Chairman, if I may clarify too, Victor Mendez in the Department of Transportation confirmed that it's an interpretation issue. It's not something I think anybody could have picked up in October of 2012. He did state that to us directly. This is a new interpretation.
And I would like to note as well that we have had discussions with Caltrans about whether they could identify compliant suppliers to us, and we'd be happy to directly source the material. Unfortunately, the 30-year history of Buy America for transportation products has focused on the procurement of guardrails and other materials used in transportation products. It hasn't focused on utility relocation equipment, which includes gas pipelines and valves and other electronic equipment. So that's fundamentally part of the challenge, that we'd love to hear from compliant suppliers, but they're struggling just as we are to understand what needs to meet the Buy America requirement and what does not. But thank you for your feedback.
Commissioner Fromer?
Yeah, just quickly, is there anyone here from Edison? Did Edison want to talk? We'd like to hear from them as well. We'll take Valerie off the hot seat for a minute. Thank you very much, Valerie.
Thank you.
But stick around. We'll have some questions.
The door's locked? The doors are locked. Right? Could you state your name for the record, please?
Roderick Brewer for Southern California Edison. And so I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our case here this morning. Originally, I was not planning to make any speaking presentations. I was just planning to take notes. But I do have some information I would like to share on behalf of Southern California Edison with regards to Buy America in our situation dealing with the Linwood grade separation project. To be frank, we are unable to comply today with Buy America. As an alternative, we offered the city of San Bernardino an agreement that allowed them to provide materials. We required a clause that protects our right to accept or reject materials at our sole discretion. But with that said, we want to make clear that we do want to show our commitment to comply with the Buy America requirements. Our people in Rosemead are working with Caltrans to try and make those things happen, and we have a detailed plan to do so that is done in an elaborate three-step approach that includes a lot of safeguards to ensure that we're meeting the steps and we're meeting them correctly. First, we want to make clear that we are prioritizing projects. We have 80-plus projects that we're looking to prioritize. We're looking at doing at-risk funding, also in addition to an agency request. We're also looking at project size and impact, material lead times, and determine the jurisdiction between FTA and FHWA. We also want to understand the compliance requirements. For example, a 90% rule component versus subcomponent bolts, and et cetera. We also want to understand certification requirements as we're looking at the FTA versus FHWA, top-level supplier or sub-suppliers, and so on. We're also looking at benchmarking with other utilities across the country and continue to interface and communicate with government agencies on all levels, and require an extension for the compliance start date from the FTA and FHWA in conjunction with other utilities and stakeholders and conduct through our federal local public affairs unit. Step 2, we're also looking to develop bills of materials for all 80-plus projects and identify compliant items and obtain certification and indemnification. We also want to identify items on these bills of materials that are not compliant. For non-compliant items, we want to locate Buy America compliant source of supplies and qualify suppliers and qualify test parts in the areas of compatibility, safety, and reliability. We also want to determine appropriate order quantities in terms of production, spares, maintenance, and also develop a Buy America clause for contracts, including indemnification, both relocation and supplier agreements. Purchase materials using new contracts. The supplier manufactures and ships. Obtain Buy America certification and apply for appropriate non-availability waivers for those items that cannot be Buy America compliant, i.e. they cannot be sourced inside the United States. Step 3, we want to develop and implement methodology for separation of materials in both inventory and on trucks, and develop and implement a process to get Buy America materials to the field. Most importantly, we want to determine the methodology for appropriate cost accounting. And a lot of the stuff that Valerie had mentioned earlier, that we are working on through a lot of stuff through our EEI, and that we are working closely with all relevant agencies to making sure that we make those requirements possible. We cannot meet the Buy America requirements today, but we do intend on meeting those requirements within the very near future.
Rod, do you have a timeline for what's our timeline then for compliance or sorting through those parts that maybe you can't find an alternative for the United States? What's your drop dead? So my concern here is this. I'm not interested in pointing fingers, but this is an urgent issue for us. We have a lot of money on these projects. As you know, delay means it could cost more money. We could lose money, and there's the inconvenience to the traveling public and, quite frankly, to the people who are working on those projects, who rely on that for their livelihood. So, what's the process here for getting this done? And my other question then is, if we've got stuff that we know we can only get from a foreign supplier, and I understand there's some exception, are we filing those necessary or taking necessary steps with the federal government to get that in the pipeline right now as we look for new suppliers? What's the timeline on that?
Timeline, I would say, should be very, very soon. I know our people have been working on the ground on this since the bill has been implemented, first off. And even though it is an interpretation issue, our folks work pretty fast on our feet and definitely intend in working with Caltrans to making sure that we do what we can to get something done within the next 3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months.
Hopefully sooner. Hopefully sooner. As you already know, Commissioner Frommer, Southern California Edison is a little deliberate in trying to get things done, but when there is a sense of urgency, we do get things done pretty fast.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brewer, Matt Miller is the ledge director for Edison in Washington, D.C. We met with him when we met OCTA and Orange County Business Council, and Edison were in the room, SoCal Gas were in the room when we met with Victor Mendez, and then we also met with everyone in the administration, including Secretary LaHood. We understand, and maybe Vince, if you might also comment on this one. We understand our meeting set up a little bit of angst and internal discussion at DOT with regard to this interpretation. And so my first question for you, Mr. Brewer, is the action item was for Matt to go back to EEI and develop some guidance to bring back to Deputy Secretary Pocari on steps that the utilities needed to ramp up and become compliant with Buy America. Do you know what's happened with that? Is that has that occurred?
To be honest with you, Commissioner Dunn, I have to say I don't know.
You don't know. Thank you. And then, Vince, could you please address, if you can, any of the internal discussions that took place after our meeting? Can you share anything between the departments on this interpretation issue within DOT? I get it if it's...
I've been threatened to get punched earlier.
Why
would I want to go? I've gotten offered a cookie, forget it.
I will tackle you. I won't punch you.
I'm done.
Did you want to identify yourself?
No, I don't. My name is Joe Tavaloni. No, there hasn't been any other information on that. The issue with the interpretation is it's the legal interpretation of that. So I think that's the way the agency is going, the department is going. So what has been offered by the secretary and the deputy secretary was they're willing to entertain whether or not they can do a phase-in period, that type of
So they're
thing.
just waiting to hear from EEI,
They're
and we
kind of-
still have not
They're waiting
heard.
to see. There's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff going on to see where, and there's two sides that are happening. There's that side. There's another side of that that's happening between Malcolm's office and my office, where we're working day to day to figure out where we can work. And again, we can't, I want to restate, we're not working getting around Buy America.
Right.
We're working through Buy America. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And I've heard some different things before earlier that were said that actually Buy America wouldn't apply, or it might apply. And so those are sit down, figure out project by project, what are you doing, what are your issue on that thing. But as an agency, the interpretation is how it's been. And until someone comes to, and I wasn't at that meeting.
Yes.
So I had talked to Victor and some other people who participated in that meeting, and that was the commitment that came from the DOT.
We just want to be able to push both EEI to get the information that they need to get. So thank you, utilities, because you need to go back to your bosses and say, what the hell's happening with EEI? We don't need 100% of the information in to come up with a good ramp-up strategy as guidance just to get back to DOT. That would be my humble recommendation. And in the same way that we didn't need every perfect project list that Caltrans could put together to get to Mr. Mendez so that he could understand the gravity of the issue for California and every congressional district here. But even talking to our congressional representatives, they're looking at us going, it's an interpretation issue. It isn't in the law. And so the more we can get people, as you so rightly warned us, to get to the facts and get people working on a common strategy, would make us a little less nervous that we could be losing money, time, and jobs. Thank you.
I agree.
Commissioner Burke?
Your mic.
The middle button.
Okay, just for my edification, I would be very interested in seeing the exact wording, or maybe you have it available so that you can tell us exactly what the wording is. And then from what I'm hearing today, there was never any debate of that language on the floor of either house, so that it was neither lobbied nor debated. It was language that went in without any kind of discussion. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Because this seems to be very material to the discussion. First of all, I guess we have to see the exact language. See, I was led to believe that the language was specific in saying that if any part of a project was purchased outside of the United States or was not domestically purchased, that it was subject to this provision. Obviously, that's not the wording. So that I think for all of us to understand better, it would be very helpful for us to have the specific language. It would have been helpful for me today to see it, and then I would be very interested in also whether or not there was ever any debate on either house, and if there was ever any lobbying. And I should be, am I correct? There was never anything lobbied on this by either one of these, PGE or Southern California Edison. There was never any lobbying on this language. Is that correct?
You asking me? Because I don't know the
well,
answer.
no, I'm
You're
asking them.
PG&E, I was gonna say, I got nothing on that one.
Commissioner Burke, with regard to what's happening on the federal level, I cannot tell you specifically if our people lobbied for this on the federal level. 2 months ago, I was made aware of the Buy America issue in talking with the Speaker's office. Our folks down in Rosemead have been working with the city of San Bernardino and have been working with Caltrans. So,
I would just like to see it and to know that because it's just, you know, 21 was really debated at length, so that it's really interesting that something like this, big as this, got by without anyone even knowing about it or debating it, and that there is a misunderstanding in terms of the specific language.
We'll gather up the information and provide it to
I'd just like
Commission
to have
staff.
a copy of the language,
Sure.
also, and the legislative history.
Commissioner Inman?
Southern California Edison, this is a topic of discussion that dominates our regional CEO transportation meeting every month. So I think you all need to make sure that this gets elevated to the right level to find solutions. And the sense of urgency, and I'm hoping that we can really elevate this to the solution point of all of us working together. I don't want to be coming back and looking at ourselves in the fall when we don't get our federal dollars that we so desperately need. And I hope you were with us the whole morning to hear how short our funding is on so many different levels. So mobility matters. It doesn't matter what phase of transportation you're in. So I respect you have a business practice to follow. I'm a business person and a former chairman leader, but we really need to elevate the urgency to find solutions together.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we do have 3 other speakers. Yeah. The first speaker is Bill Thomas, a former congressman from Kern County.
Thank you very much for giving me a little bit of time. I didn't realize my 28 years in Congress was going to be called upon. It takes me about 10 seconds to explain why members voted yes. I can assure you, not one of them understood the interpretation that it applied absolutely 100%, not only to the traditional materials for building roads, but what goes under roads, what controls electronics and hydraulics on both sides of the road. And so you're looking, when I was chairman of Ways and Means, we used to have a bill called the, it was a miscellaneous tariff bill. And we would go over those items that we have established weren't produced in the United States, and therefore you would allow for limited importation. I'll just tell you, over those 28 years, that list grew and grew and grew. And we're now coming to head, and I agree with you completely, it's an interpretation of what Buy America means. And had most members known that's what it was going to mean by virtue of the intent, many of them would not have voted for it, but it would have been a political risk had they voted no, notwithstanding all of that information. The job is just impossible. We have to do it. All of us have involved ourselves making lemonade out of lemon. And this one is a gigantic one. It's not going to take months. It's going to take years. I want to address the 4 months that we have left. Commissioner Gardino, I know fully how you feel about Kern County. And let me say, I heard Ms. Schwartzinger talk about the aspiring counties. I heard Mr. Chesley talk about the self-help counties. I will tell you, in my time in Kern County, it has been a try and try again county to get them to understand that they have a responsibility. I will tell you, recent events have brought me to the point that I think we're going to try again, and you'll understand as I go through this. Commissioner Dunn, I want to focus on the 4 months that we have left in identifying all of those projects that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and are possibly going to be tripped up on $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 worth of particular components. It's just nonsense. Eventually, it will be resolved. But I don't want to look at those next 4 months as a problem. I want to look at them as an opportunity. An opportunity for those people, for example, Commissioner Dunn, who are waiting in line under the 99 Bond Act for $30 million, $40 million, that if we take a list of those, and there are a number of projects out there, not an enormous number, but a number of projects out there that do meet any and all criteria that could be funded from the federal money that may not be now utilized where we thought it was going to be utilized to fund these smaller programs. But the beauty of it is, for example, we have several in Kern County, and I believe they're going to be addressed. They're 20, 30, 40 million, but they'll go a long way, one, toward accomplishing some needed items in small particular areas of California, but two, it'll help us conserve the 99 Bond Act money that we otherwise would have spent. And I'll put anybody in front of me who has a project who meets those criteria, and one for sure, and he's here today, would be the Stanislaus County COG chairman, who has a project that's coming up on the Bond 99 list that could be funded out of this, that frees up $40-some million. So I would speak to those who are looking for $10 million, $20 million, $40 million, who expected to stand in line from whatever source may be available, and that frankly over the next 4 months as we build the list, and especially the strategy and the execution of how we solve the Buy America problem, if we could put together a short list of those worthy and appropriate projects to be funded between now and the 1st of October. And the point that I referenced is the fact that we've taken some of our money and we're connecting Highway 58 dead-ended into 99. And what we're getting from our critics now is that we only minimally allowed access on the new freeway. We haven't maximally allowed access. And I'm writing down every one of those to tell them if they want it, all they have to do is vote yes on the measure. We haven't debated whether it's 1 cent or a half cent. Either one is more than enough to accomplish those kinds of goals. So while we're looking at this mountain we have to climb, there just is this window of opportunity to increase the effectiveness of money we do have in California available to use. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, the next speaker, excuse me, Commissioner Gardino.
Yes, Congressman Thomas, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for your years of service in Congress as well and your leadership on Ways and Means. I have to share with you, we were back in D.C. with a group of our CEOs from Silicon Valley while this was being debated on the Buy America provision. And I'll say it with a smile, but we were meeting with a particular member of Congress who felt very strongly about the Buy America provision and was telling our CEOs they needed to be good Americans and do everything in America, every part, every bit of assembly, as he sat there with his BlackBerry, a great Canadian company. Yes.
Ever since the McCormick Reaper, I don't think anything has been built entirely with American parts, and all those cards, frankly, have minority American parts in them now. A majority of them come. But that's just the way the world is today. That's why most of the solution will be in the interpretation. But if you've got any ideas as to how to get people to yes, on our ballot measure, I'm looking forward to you coming on down and helping me, because a specific example of where the money will be spent, to me, has been the most effective way to get them to say yes, because they'll see what they're buying.
I'd be happy to help on that, and I know my colleague Jim Arp, who's helped lead more of these than just about anyone in California, would be happy to help as well, sir.
I think Congressman Thomas could sell igloos to Eskimos. This guy is good, I'll tell you.
The hard part's trying to sell struck matches. That's the tough one.
Okay, moving right along. Our next speaker is Raul Rojas. Top that one, Raul.
I always hate following Mr. Thomas. That's a tough act to follow. Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, thank you for allowing me to speak today. Again, my name is Raul Rojas. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Bakersfield, and I'm representing the City of Bakersfield today. I want to come up before you and let you know that we support Mr. Doherty and Caltrans and their efforts on this Buy America, and would like to offer up any help that we could offer in that endeavor, whatever it is, whatever if it's money or looking after the solution. We have $600 million at risk also in about a year from now, which will fall under the Buy America issue, and it's a large sum of money. It's a large, very large project, and it's the connection of Highway 58 to the West Side Parkway, which is 2 months away from being completed, and it's an 8-mile stretch, and it'll be a 10-mile stretch as completed. But this could hold up a $600 million project for which the city has $400 million of skin in the game. So we are a significant player, and we do have a lot of federal money, and this is a big issue. So we'd like to make sure that this issue does get resolved in a timely manner, because in about a year from now, it'll be an issue for that particular project. I also want to address the fact that whenever there's monies available for transportation in the state of California, we want to make sure that it's spent in California, whether it's in the city of Bakersfield or any jurisdiction in the state of California. It doesn't matter. We really are concerned that we don't want to lose a dollar. Whether that dollar's spent there or there doesn't matter to us. But if there's dollars at risk, we want to make sure that it gets spent. And I'm here to also to offer up, we have 2 projects that need construction dollars, that meet NEPA requirements, have had clearance, no utility issues on them, and could be made available for dollars that, if there are dollars at risk, and if it comes to the point, whenever that is, I don't know where that's going to come soon or not, that dollars may leave California, and if there are others around, we're good with that too. So we have 2 projects that are ready to go out to bid at any time. We have 2 projects that are in bid right now that if the color of money changed, that would be okay, and they also meet all the criteria, NEPA clearance, and all the Buy America issues have been resolved. So that's what I'm here for, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions? Raul? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker on this item is Ray Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. I just wanted to step up and make some comments in response to what Edison stated here a few minutes ago. First of all, I want to say, Chairman Gilmetti, I agree with your assessment. We have got to figure this out. This isn't new news. We have been at Sandbag have been working with Edison on this issue on the Linwood grade separation now for some time. It's disappointing to me that we were not able to resolve the issue as late as last night. In conversations with managers at Edison, they did not have a material list because I had offered to buy all of the materials on the contract so that we could provide the Buy America certification, and we could not resolve what the material list was going to be, what we needed to purchase for the project. The next thing we tried to do is look at it from the context of in Buy America provisions there is the allowance that for $2,500 or 1/10% of the total project cost, which in our case is a $22 million construction project, which translates to $22,000, there is an exception where you can use non-American products. You can use foreign steel and iron products. So we were then trying to figure out, okay, if we had a material list, then we could figure out how much it would actually cost. And so maybe we could fall under those provisions, and then we would write our special provisions such that our contractor that we bring on board couldn't use any more of that. All I could get last night was a rough order of magnitude of $15,000. Now remember, I have $22,000 and a demand that Sandbag indemnify Southern California Edison of any and all impacts with Buy America. We can't do that. I've got $8.8 million that we're asking for an allocation here today of TCIF. So I think it's ironic that this is a goods movement project in San Bernardino County, a county that still suffers from the economic recession. This translates to jobs in our county, $8.8 million that we're asking you that you can't allocate today because I don't have a right-of-way certification, because we can't figure out what materials are going to be used on this job yet. And then I've got $8.8 million additionally of federal funding that we may lose if we can't move forward with an allocation from you here today, because your next meeting isn't until August. This is a real problem, and this is not something that just crept up. Thank you.
That's a disappointing statement you made, Ray. Any other questions? Commissioner Fromer?
Can I ask Caltrans? I had heard that I believe it was the L.A. Department of Water and Power was prepared to certify on projects that were impacted regarding their utilities. Is that correct or incorrect? Is that just an urban myth?
No. I can't speak completely for L.A. Metro, but I do know there were a couple of projects that they worked on with the water company to find compliant materials and help them acquire that. So yes, not all utility owners fall under the same ball. There are a lot that have been able to be successful, and that was one good example in L.A.
Okay. I want to say one thing quickly, because we spent a lot of time on this to the utilities. And we thank you for coming here today, and I appreciate the commitment to Buy America. We've been at this for several months now. And when we don't know, what you just heard from Ray and others, we don't know what material still, we're not really sure what's going on. We want to work with you guys, but I'm just telling you, to take back to your folks, if federal money starts sliding off these projects, state money we come to a halt, you all are going to be in the masher basher. And just understand that. Everybody wants to work with you, and I am not attributing any ill motives to anyone, because I know both of you in particular very well, and I know you're good people. But we have to get going on this. This is not a situation where we should be at this point not even understanding what's at stake. Okay? That's all I want to say.
Okay, moving on. We're going to do one more item before we do a little break. Item number 17. Brian?
Right. I'm going to provide an update on the California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Work Group, and I'll be brief here in light of a break coming after this. We're working off, again, the charge of the governor in the budget to bring together a broad group of transportation stakeholders to refine the needs assessment that the CTC did in 2011, explore long-term pay-as-you-go funding options, and to evaluate the most appropriate level of government to deliver various transportation infrastructure. And we've had a very good meeting so far. We've had about 5 meetings. We had a kickoff meeting, and then we broke into various subgroups. We've had a highway group, a local road group, a rail and mass transportation group, and an active transportation group. And we finish off really with round 1 tomorrow, when we're going to participate at the California Freight Advisory Commission meeting down in Long Beach and receive some input from that group as part of the session. So this has been what some have called the easy part, if you will. We're really going through making sure we have a common understanding of the current state of the system, getting some levels of magnitude for bringing the system back to a level of good repair in different time frames. Next, we're going to start with round 2, if you will, with these groups and talk a little more specifically about narrowing the priorities down to really what we see as most critical, getting further input on performance and priorities and so forth. So we've had, again, I want to be appreciative and thankful to all the people that have traveled, in some cases great distances, to help us out with this effort, and we're making good progress.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of Brian? Okay, we're going to take a 30-minute break. Be back at 1:35, please. Thank you.